Welcome to the Leadership Brief, a space where I use storytelling to help impart actionable tips to level up your leadership and your life. Inspired by the 5-year anniversary of the COVID shutdown, this week I'll share some tips about how to consciously craft the story we tell about pivotal periods in our life. 5 years ago, a party planned to celebrate my 40th birthday fell on March 14th, 2020, the weekend the COVID shutdown began. We made the difficult decision to cancel the party. I'll never forget a conversation with my then 70-year-old dad, who, having recovered from his first bout with COVID, lamented about the shuttering of New York City where he lived and said, "It'll be about 5 years before we return from this." With a newborn and a preschooler at home and no end in sight, it was all I could do to get through the day, let alone think about the 5-year mark. And yet, here we are. Last weekend, exactly 5 years from the day of the shutdown, I revisited the Kona Club, the site of my canceled 40th birthday celebration. It was a catharsis and celebration for all of us. The New York Times recently posted an article interviewing teens from Oakland Tech, our neighborhood high school, about the impact the school closures had on their burgeoning lives. Reading their stories prompted me to reflect on my own journey through this unprecedented time and the gifts and losses that I've experienced. The gifts, in many ways, led to who I am today, while the costs are still playing out even 5 years later. This is an exercise I like to do with teams when big events arise as a way to reflect and make explicit their impact. Examples of moments where this might be important include company acquisitions, return to work mandates, leadership transitions, or major strategic pivots. The exercise will take a different shape if it's done in the moment versus after the event is in the rearview mirror. As humans, we have a bias to more closely examine the gifts or the costs of any large or small event in our lives. If we're optimistic, we focus on the positive, and if we're skeptics, we may dwell on the negative. Neither approach is wrong, but both have limitations. The key is to surface both sides and then take conscious control of the narrative you want to tell about the time. Here's my personal inventory 5 years later. Since I'm an optimist, I'll start with the gifts. The gifts were that I had more quality time with my newborn baby, Simon, who was born December 27th, 2019, and deeper bonding as a family of four. I also was able to take my coaching training program online, which wasn't an option broadly available before times. Lastly, I gained the courage to reach out, build relationships, and dream big about launching a new business in ways I wouldn't have and couldn't have in the past. Some of the costs of the COVID shutdown for me were that my family and friends missed building a bond with Simon during a pivotal time, and we all lost the ability to mark big milestones in traditional ways. Travel and experience we had planned with our children was no longer possible. And lastly, the heightened anxiety that colored even simple in-person interactions is something that I still feel remnants of today. The next question becomes, what's the title of this chapter in your life? For me, the title of the COVID chapter is The Great Redirection. What began as a period of intense survival mode ultimately redirected my career, my family priorities, and built my confidence and clarity about where I can have the biggest impact. The fact that this experience also coincided with a transition to middle age also reminded me of the importance of taking personal responsibility for my choices. There's power in rewriting our narratives. When we take time to consciously craft the story we tell about pivotal periods in our lives, we reclaim agency. It means holding space for the complexity of our experiences while choosing which elements to carry forward. For leaders navigating organizational change, this practice becomes even more crucial. The stories leaders tell about transitions, whether it's a restructuring, a market shift, or a pandemic set the tone for how their teams process and move through these experiences. I've worked with leadership teams and individual leaders who, after acquisitions, remain stuck in narratives of loss and resentment for years after the change. But I've also witnessed teams who, through intentional reflection and meaning making, transformed difficult transitions into periods of unprecedented growth and innovation. Now it's your turn to author your next chapter. Whether you're marking a milestone birthday, as I just did, navigating a career transition, or simply taking stock at this 5-year pandemic anniversary, I invite you to try this reflection exercise. Here are the 3 questions. What were the genuine gifts that emerged from this period of change? What were the real costs or losses you experienced? What title would you give this chapter in your life or leadership? I'd love to hear your reflections if you feel moved to share them. As we all navigate the ongoing ripple effects of the last 5 years, there's wisdom in our collective meaning making. And I'll leave you with this quote, which I love, from one of my favorite authors, Dani Shapiro. The power to rewrite your story lies in understanding that you are the narrator, not just the character.